Okay, so this is a quick overview of the color page in Davinci Resolve and how to make basic color adjustments. So right now we are in the edit window and we want to go to our color window. So I'm going to take my cursor and go down to this little color icon down here in the bottom of the program window. Click that, and now we've opened the color page. So this may look like a lot of information here, like what am I looking at? What is happening? Let's just go through it one by one. So on the top left, we have our program monitor, so you can see the clip we're looking at. Right here, kind of in the right, we have our node tree window. This is where we make our adjustments. So you can think of this little box, this node right here. If you're coming from Premiere and the Adobe ecosystem, you can think of a node as kind of like an adjustment layer. So as I add nodes, it's like adding adjustment layers to a clip. Then you can see we have all these clips down here. If I can just click and switch between my different clips that I have. These are all the clips on the timeline, and they're placed in the order that they're placed on my timeline in the edit page. So this is like the beginning of my timeline here. And as I slide across, this is the end of my timeline down here. This is the last clip on my timeline. And then here's like a quick little preview of your timeline, in case you're wondering. This little playhead that can scrub through my timeline. And then right here we have our primary color wheels with this little circle icon selected. Make sure that's selected. This is like your basic color adjustment window. You can think of it like that. We have our temperature, which I can click, hold, and drag to the right to increase, or drag to the left to decrease my temperature. And we can do that as well with our tint, contrast, our mid-tone detail, which I'll explain what that is later. As well as down here at the bottom of our primary color wheels, we have our color boost. You can think of this as like the vibrance in Premiere, adding vibrance to your image. You can also adjust your shadows right here. Highlights, we have our saturation we can adjust, and then we have hue and our luminance mix. Then now we have these big old colorful wheels right here, and you see lift, gamma, gain, and offset. And you're thinking, well, what the heck does that mean? Well, think of it like this. Here on the far left, your lift, think of it as your shadows. Your gamma is your midtones, and the gain is your highlights. And then offset is your global luminance adjustment, or just like adjusting the general exposure of your image. That's a good way to think of it. So to adjust or change the exposure, we have these dials, these little gray dials on the bottom of our color wheels. And this will adjust our luminance. So if I click, hold, and drag, you can see my highlights are being decreased. If I drag it to the right, I can increase my highlights. And if I don't like what I did, I want to reset it, I can go up next to my gain wheel and click this little rotating arrow icon, this reset icon. Click that, we've reset our change there back to normal. All right, so let's go ahead and add a LUT to this clip first before we make any more adjustments. The first thing we want to do is click our node, our default node, and we're going to right click it and click node label. I'm going to name this one LUT, and this node is going to house our LUT for our clip. So now that I've labeled it, we're going to right click, go down to the LUT option here, just hover over it and then slide over, and you can see we have our different LUTs that are included in Davinci Resolve. So these are pre-installed with the software. This shot was shot with the Sony FX3 and the S-Log3 color profile. So I'm going to go down to Sony S-Log3 to Rec 709, and I'm going to click that, and we have added our LUT to the image. Now that we've added a LUT, what we can do is start to adjust our exposure, add some sharpening, and add some basic saturation as well to our image to get it where we want it. So to do that, we need to add another node. Well, before we do that, let's explain kind of how the node tree works. So this little green dot right here you can think of as like your base image. The image you shot straight out of camera and threw onto your timeline. It's like the raw image you have straight from the camera. And then each node is an adjustment we're making to that raw image. So as we move along our node tree to the right, we're making our adjustments. And then finally, this little green dot on the far right side here is going to be our final image after we made all our adjustments, and it's going to be what's exported for our edited video. So we've done our LUT. Now let's add a node before our LUT. So I'm going to right click on this node, go to the Add Node section, just hover over it, slide my mouse over. I'm going to click Add Serial Before. You can see the quick key for that on Windows is Shift S. So I'm going to click that. And then now you can see we've added a node. I'm just going to drag it over. And we're going to right click on this node, click Node Label, and this is going to be our exposure node. So I'm going to type in EXP for our exposure. Pressing enter, there we go. Now let's actually look at our exposure of our image, and to do that we need to look at the scopes. And you're wondering, well, where's the scopes at? I don't see any scopes here. If we go to the right where my cursor's at, you can see there's a little scopes looking icon. If I hover over it, Davinci will tell us, hey, that's the scopes, and I'm going to click that, and now we have opened our scopes. So right now I have the vector scope open. If you go over to where it says vector scope, there's a little arrow next to it, and click that, and we have all the different scopes Davinci Resolve offers. So we have our parade, our waveform, vector scope, histogram, and this one that I just never use and don't really know what it is. But for exposure, let's look at our waveform. So I'm going to select that waveform, and here is our waveform. So you can see we're actually doing pretty well here. Not much we really need to adjust for exposure, but let's just add a little bit of contrast just to show you here. So now that we have our waveform open, let's go over to our primary color wheels window that we looked at earlier, and let's start with our highlights. Let's add some contrast to this image. So I'm going to go over to our gain section, our highlights section here, and I'm going to select this gray wheel, click, hold, and drag it to the right to increase my highlights a bit. I know I'm blowing them out, but I'm just showing this as an example. So I'm going to drag it to the right there, and then let's decrease our shadows a bit, or I mean, I guess increase the shadows. Let's add some more shadow. So I'm going to go over to the lift section here, where my cursor's at, click that little wheel down here, click and drag it to the left to increase my shadows, just like that. And now we have added some contrast. So I'm gonna, I think it's Control D, yeah. So if I do Control D on Windows, and I think it's Option D on Mac, you might need to look up that shortcut to confirm it. That enables and disables the node you have selected. So we have our exposure node selected here. So if I do Control D, Option D on Mac, I think, it's going to disable that node, so it's going to gray out like this. You can see our color, or our contrast has gone away. Re-enable it, so there's before and after. Before, after, just like that. Great, so now we've added our exposure. So let's add some saturation. So I'm going to right click on this exposure node we have, click Add Node, and this time I'm going to click Add Serial. And this is going to add a node right after the node you have selected. So we had exposure selected, I added serial, and it added a new node right after it, right here. Now let's right click this node, node label. I'm going to label this one Sat for saturation. Now that we've got that one labeled, let's add some saturation. So we're going to go back down to our primary color wheels window to this saturation adjustment right here. And let's just do something like, I don't know, let's do like 65 for now. Okay, so now we need to look at our vector scope to see what our saturation did, our added saturation did. So I'm going to go to our scopes window here and click this down arrow and click vector scope. And here we can see and look at our saturation. Now I'm going to do that Control D again to disable it. You can see our saturation went down and it increased when I re-enable the node. So there's before adding saturation and there's after adding saturation. Look at that. And you may be wondering, like, why are you adding different nodes for each adjustment? And this is the very reason right here that we're doing is I can disable and enable each adjustment that I've made to this clip. So if I want to look at this clip but without the exposure adjustments I made, I can click this exposure node and then disable it, and now I can see it with just the regular exposure out of camera. And there's the added exposure I did. It allows you to isolate and view each different change you've made to your clip by doing it in a different node. Okay, so we've added our exposure adjustments, we've done some saturation adjustments, we've applied our LUT. I think the last thing we should do is add a bit of sharpening to our image here. So let's select the first node in our node tree. I'm going to do, actually let's just not do the hotkey for this. Let's just right click, go to add node, and then add serial before to add a node before the selected node. Then let's right click this one, node label, and let's label this one sharpening. And so now we're going to go back to that mid/detail, I call this ND for short, option right here that we mentioned earlier. And this applies sharpening in a unique way. So it applies sharpening kind of, I guess it's more so targeting your midtones. So if I go and let's say I'm going to increase it to 25 and press enter. I don't know if you can really see that. Yeah, you can kind of see it on the recording here. It's kind of hard to see with this tiny window. Maybe if let me make it bigger. There you go. So you can see it as before and after. I've added a bit of mid-tone detail sharpening. Here we go. Before, after, before, after. So I try and keep it between 25 and 50 for log footage. I mean, it just depends on your shot. But in this case, let's go up to 50. Boom. And I think that looks pretty good. So let's do Control D to disable this sharpening node. Before adding sharpening, after adding mid-tone detail sharpening. And then something else, oh whoops, cancel that. Something else you might want to do is add a bit more just global sharpening for the edges and whatnot. To do that, we can go to this little sharpening icon right here. I mean, it's also a way to add blur too, so that's why it says blur. But you can click this little icon right here, and it's going to pull up these little sliders that you're like, what the heck is radius, HV ratio, and scaling? Don't worry, just go to your radius adjustment here and think of this as like increasing and adding blur or increasing and adding sharpness. So if I just hover over one of these values here, let's do like this red 0.5 value. I can just click, hold, and drag to the left to increase my sharpness, or drag to the right to decrease and add blur. And I like to try and do like 0.45 or so, between 0.45 and 0.5. So I'm just going to click that little number right here and type in 0.45, and boom, we have added our sharpness to the image. So I'm going to do Control D to disable, enable, disable, enable. And there's our sharpness. So this is just basic color adjustment in Davinci Resolve, how to add a LUT, how to add some saturation, adjust your exposure, and add some sharpness. Hope this is helpful.